My to-be wife ghosted me on the morning of our wedding after getting an email from her high school sweetheart. I 29M stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie for what felt like the 100th time. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding day. But as I glanced at my phone for the 10th time in as many minutes, a sinking feeling in my gut told me something was terribly wrong. My fiancé 27F hadn't responded to any of my messages since last night. At first, I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters and her desire to follow the "don't see the bride before the wedding" tradition. But as the hours ticked by and the ceremony drew nearer, her silence became deafening. I tried calling her again, but it went straight to voicemail. With trembling hands, I dialed her sister's number. "Hey, is everything okay? Is she with you?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. The long pause on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. "I'm so sorry," her sister said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's gone." My world came crashing down around me. Gone? What did she mean, gone? As her sister explained in halting words, my fiancé had received an email late last night from her high school sweetheart. Apparently, he'd poured his heart out, confessing he'd never stopped loving her and begging her to give him another chance. And just like that, she'd vanished. Left a note saying she couldn't go through with the wedding, that she needed time to think, that she was sorry. Sorry? Sorry? I felt like I was going to be sick. The next few hours passed in a blur. Somehow, I managed to pull myself together enough to face our guests, to tell them the wedding was off. The pitying looks, the awkward silence, the hushed whispers. It was all too much. I retreated to my apartment, feeling hollowed out and numb. Days turned into weeks. I oscillated between grief, anger, and disbelief. How could she do this to me? To us? We'd been together for 5 years, had built a life together. We'd talked about our future, about growing old side by side. And she threw it all away for what? A guy she hadn't seen in nearly a decade? I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the constant loop of questions in my head. But everywhere I turned, there were reminders of her. Her favorite mug in the kitchen cupboard, the framed photo of us on our first vacation together, the engagement ring I'd spent months saving up for, now mocking me from its velvet box. It was about a month after the non-wedding when I finally heard from her. A text message of all things. "Can we talk?" I stared at those 3 words for what felt like hours, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to delete it and pretend I'd never seen it. But a larger part needed answers, needed closure. We met at a neutral coffee shop, one we'd never been to together. When I saw her walk in, my heart clenched painfully in my chest. She looked different, smaller somehow, like she'd lost weight. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her usual confident stride was replaced by hesitant steps. "Hi," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. I couldn't bring myself to return the greeting. "Why?" I asked, the word coming out harsher than I'd intended. She flinched, her eyes dropping to the table. "I'm so sorry," she began, but I cut her off. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, struggling to keep my voice low. "You left me at the altar. You ghosted me on our wedding day. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it." I panicked. When I got that email from him, it was like a door I thought was closed forever suddenly flew open. All these old feelings came rushing back, and I couldn't think straight. I listened as she poured out her story, how she'd always wondered what if about her first love, how seeing his words had made her question everything, how she'd convinced herself that if she felt any doubt at all, she couldn't go through with the wedding. "So you ran away," I said flatly, "without even talking to me about it." She nodded miserably. "It was wrong. So wrong. I know that now. I was a coward, and I hurt you in the worst way possible." "What about him?" I couldn't help but ask. "Your high school sweetheart? Was it worth it?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "No," she said. "God, no. We met up, and it was awful. All those feelings I thought I had, they were just memories, nostalgia. The person I remembered doesn't exist anymore. We are both different people now." I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction at her words, followed immediately by shame. This whole situation was messed up beyond belief. "So what now?" I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted. She took a deep breath. I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance you could forgive me? That we could try again? I stared at her, incredulous. Try again? Are you serious? I know it's a lot to ask, she said quickly, but I love you. I never stopped loving you. I made a horrible mistake, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you if you'll let me. For a brief, insane moment, I considered it. The thought of holding her again, of waking up next to her. But then I remembered the gut-wrenching pain of standing alone at the altar, of having to face our friends and family with the news that she'd left me. No, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I'm sorry, but no. You're right. You made a horrible mistake, and maybe someday I'll be able to forgive you for it. But I can never trust you again. Not the way I need to trust a partner. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she nodded. I understand, she whispered. I'm so sorry. We sat there in silence for a few more minutes before I stood up. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. Goodbye. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The pain was still there, and I knew it would be for a long time. But for the first time since that awful day, I felt like I could breathe again. In the months that followed, I focused on healing. I went to therapy, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship, and even started dating again, casually, nothing serious. I learned to trust my instincts more, to communicate better, and to value myself. Looking back, I can see now that there were signs I'd ignored, red flags I'd dismissed. We'd both been so caught up in the idea of our perfect future that we'd stopped really seeing each other in the present. I don't regret the years we spent together. They taught me a lot about love, about myself, and about what I truly want in a partner. But I'm grateful, in a way, that I found out who she really was before we said I do. Sometimes, the best thing that can happen to you feels like the worst thing in the moment. Being left at the altar was painful, humiliating, and life-altering. But it also forced me to confront some hard truths about myself and my relationships. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll find someone new, someone who values commitment and honesty as much as I do. Or maybe I'll embrace the single life for a while longer. Either way, I know now that I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes my way. As for my ex-fiancée, last I heard she was single and had moved to a new city for a fresh start. Part of me hopes she's found peace and learned from her mistakes. Another part of me hopes karma bites her in the ass. I'm only human after all. In the end, I've realized that life rarely goes according to plan. Sometimes the plot twists are painful, sometimes they're exhilarating. But each one shapes us, teaches us, and ultimately leads us to where we're meant to be. So here I am, a jilted groom turned unexpected bachelor, navigating this new chapter of my life. It's not the story I thought I'd be living. But you know what? I'm starting to think it might turn out to be an even better one.